Welcome to Business Legal Lifecycle TV, the live TV show all about the legal aspects of your business. We've designed this TV show to educate you in simple to understand plain English ways for complex legal terms, to help you understand why you undertake certain legal aspects of your business, and to help you develop a plan for the future success of your business. Did you know that any business owner is on average 7 months away from losing everything? And that is the average time that it takes for a successful business to fold when an aspect of their business is not set up correctly. Have you ever wanted to get legal advice but didn't understand what was going on? And do you feel like there's a divide between lawyers and their clients? If that's so, then this TV show is for you. We've designed the show to empower you and your business with the knowledge and tools to help ensure that those problems that so many businesses encounter don't happen to you. Business Legal Lifecycle TV delivers a twice-weekly show focusing on the legal aspects of your business. At lunchtime on Mondays, we present Fast Fix Monday, a quick 5 to 10 minute show to give you some actionable steps to consider for this week in your business. And at lunchtime on Wednesdays, we present our in-depth show. It's generally between 30 minutes to an hour to go through the complicated legal aspects of your business in a simple to understand and plain English way. That can be through educational pieces or interviews with experts in the fields. We welcome you to Business Legal Lifecycle TV, and here's our show.
Welcome everyone to this Business Legal Lifecycle TV Wednesday episode. My name's Jeremy Stretton.
Hi everyone, my name's Craig Mason.
And we're here today to talk to you about the first month of, the first episode of Phase 7 expansion. So Phase 7 expansion comes in the Business Legal Lifecycle. Now, if you are watching this on Facebook Live or YouTube or Periscope, great, thank you very much. But if you are listening to us on the podcast, then please visit businesslegallifecycle.com.au to see a copy of the Business Legal Lifecycle, which I've put up on the screen right now. So the Business Legal Lifecycle is a concept that Craig and I have developed as part of our business. And it basically goes through when you should do things from a legal point of view, and is a practical guide for business owners on the legal aspects of their business. So on today's show, being the 1st of November 2017, which is when we're recording this, is the first session on expansion, franchising and licensing. So when you know you're at this phase is when you're basically you've got a business that's set up properly. So you've gone through the initial phases. You've obviously gone through conception. You've gone through phase 2 startup. You've set up everything correctly for the beginning part of your business. You've then thought about your initial clients and what you need for those initial clients and what documentation and processes you need. Phase 4 is bringing on employees. So this is where you bring on the actual employees to help you out to actually do work in the business. Phase 5 is protecting intellectual property, which we discussed a couple of months ago, and that's all about what you need to do to protect your IP in your business. And the phase before this was phase 6, which is maximizing your business. What that's about is actually getting your business ready for expansion. All too often people in business go into business and they're not ready to expand. We'll talk about the problems that people go through in expansion in today's episode. And basically, the whole point of the Business Legal Lifecycle is to talk about when you need to do things in business. So today's show is when and how that you can expand your business. So we're going to talk about what is expansion. We're going to talk about what to look out for when you expand your business. We're going to talk about the different concepts that you need when you're leasing a new premises. We're going to talk about considerations to have with employees in that new when you're expanding. We're going to talk about mergers and acquisitions. So this is buying other businesses and merging with other businesses to basically expand and grow your business. And the final one that we're going to talk about is equipment and what that can be used for. So Craig, anything else you want to add before we kick off?
No, I don't think so. I think let's go.
All right. Well, I'll go to what is expansion if you want to talk about that.
Yeah. All right. So as Jeremy said, if you're at that phase in your life cycle of your business, you're thinking about potentially expanding your business. So expansion is obvious. expanding into a new market or expanding the size of your business in some way. So during this phase, if you haven't followed the life cycle, then you need to think about whether or not you've got all your systems, processes, procedures in place. Because if you don't, then you might run into some problems when you want to expand. Obviously, you'll be looking at other markets that you can expand into. That might be international or domestic, or some form of expansion on your brand, or bringing on more people into your business, whatever it might be. And you'll also be looking at, so you might have a different product from a different business, and they might want to come in and use that. So we'll talk a bit more about that as we go along today. And the other consideration you should have during the expansion is there someone out there that can help you do this? We're pretty big in Business Legal Lifecycle talking about your team or your consultants, and one of those could be during this phase is to bring someone in that's an expert in expanding your type of business, because you want someone there that can assist you, because you're obviously still going to be working in your business and et cetera, et cetera. So you want someone that can help you out. So obviously that's pretty important to think about these things before you head off into expanding. You get all these things right, and then the expansion process is going to be a lot easier. So yeah, that's what I want to say about expansion. Jeremy, was there anything else you wanted to add?
Not on there. Let's click over to the next one, which is what to look out for. So this is a really important thing to consider when you're expanding. Really, anything that you're doing in business, you need to think about what you've got to look out for in that circumstance. So whether it's the first time that you've expanded the business, or the fifth or sixth or seventh time, the same factors go into the consideration of what you need to do when you're expanding. One of the great things to think about is that if you've got a problem in your business and you expand your business, you're going to multiply those problems. Sometimes you can double them if you've got two business premises. Sometimes it can be a lot worse. To give you an example, so we run, as anyone who's watching this probably knows, is we run a law firm, Stratton Mason Lawyers. We have 2 offices. One of the early things that we had when we expanded to open up a second office was just the practice management software. So back in the day, and we're talking probably 5 years ago now, so it's not really that long ago, we had a server-based system for our files. Those files were sitting on a server in one of our offices, and that meant that everyone in both offices needed to access both offices needed to access one server. Now you can imagine that's quite difficult when you've got, say, 10 employees all trying to access one server, especially in Australia, where the internet hasn't been great for a long time. That caused all manner of problems until we moved all of that into the cloud. And just having that one step made everything so much easier. So you need to think about, where are the bottlenecks in your business? That's probably the first key. Where are the bottlenecks that are going to slow you down and stop you from being able to do what you want to do? So we're going to talk about leasing new premises. So you need to have a think about what those leases are and then the terms, and Craig will go through that in a minute. You've got to think about what your business plan is for the future. You know, last month, in October 2017, if you are watching a replay of this, it was all about conception. And one of the big things that we're very big on is setting goals and starting up with an end in mind, as we talked about. Well, most people, when they start businesses, aren't really thinking about expansion, international expansion, or even setting up second or third offices or business premises. So you need to reset your goals at this stage and actually think about, well, what are those goals and where am I going with those goals and into the future of my business? So having a think about those kind of things are very important for the business. You also need to think about your employees, and we'll go into a bit more detail about that and how employees interact. And also your systems. So as I said before, it's not just your hardware systems that need to be multiplied when you're expanding. You need to think about what other systems you have in place that could be used. So if you have a system for how to expand your business, or how to operate your business, then you need to think about how that can be put into another business premises. So think about and we'll talk about franchising a bit more, but think about the classic example of the great franchise systems like your McDonald's and your KFCs and all those great businesses. They've been built on a consistent model, and that's because they had really good systems in place for their businesses. So we're going to talk about things like that this month, but it's something to really think about having in place. And if you don't have it in place, If you haven't done that in phase 5, protecting intellectual property, there is no point in expanding until you've done those things. So that's enough about what you need to look out for. We're going to go through some specifics of things to look out for, but in a broad brush, making sure that you've understood your systems, both hardware and your intellectual property systems, and making sure that you've had to think about your goals are pretty important. Craig, anything else on what to look out for?
I think the biggest thing with this is the attitude of, if you've got some problems in your business or the bottlenecks or whatever it might be, that it'll all fix itself later. I think don't think like that, because fixing it now before you expand is going to make things so much better. If you don't and then go out and expand, then those problems you've got are going to amplify even more when you've got more premises or more people or whatever it might be. If you're merging or acquiring a business and you've got issues in your business, then it's just going to become a major issue going forward. So biggest thing is, don't think that if you've got some things that that need to be fixed, that they'll fix themselves, or you can fix them later. I think is not the right attitude in our view.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the end of the day, it saves people thousands of dollars. And I think probably the hardest thing for us, especially with that, with all those things, Craig, is the fact that people never see the saving. It's money that they've saved, but they don't actually see it. So, trust us. We've advised people. We've been there before. These are the things that you need to think about before you actually go expanding, because it will save you thousands of dollars that you may never realize and they may never see, but it does.
Absolutely. Alrighty. All right. So what we want to talk about next is new premises. So leasing a new premises, which is obviously a way of expanding. You're going into a larger space or in a different area, whatever it might be. So there's a lot of considerations you need to have when you're entering into a new lease. Obviously, there's going to be rent. How much is the rent? Is outgoings included or not? What are the outgoings? Those sorts of things. So you need to know the price of the new premises, because that's obviously important for your cash flow projections, which we've spoken about before, that you should have set up, so you know what your rent's going to be. You want to work out, you do some research, talk to agents, those sorts of things. What is the rent compared to the market? So make sure you're not paying too much, obviously. Most agents will tell you what square metre rate is in the particular area, those sorts of things. And you can negotiate with the landlord or the agent about that, but obviously it's, you need to do your own research as well, so you know what sort of rent you're likely to be paying. The other one, and it's pretty important with expansion, is the term of the lease. So you want to know, depending on your sort of business, are you going to be entering a 5-year lease or a 3-year lease or less? Because that's relevant to your expansion and your plans as to how long your new premises is going to be. If it's a short-term stop before you go somewhere else in your expansion plans, then obviously don't be entering into a 10-year lease or a 5-year lease. So pretty important to think about that. The other one as well is, if depending on your type of industry, is the permitted use of the actual premises that you're thinking of renting. There's no point renting premises and you're a particular area or a particular industry, and then you find out that you can't actually operate that business from those premises. So pretty important to look at the permitted use. It might be that you might be a mechanic or something like that, and that area you can't have mechanics or spray painters or whatever it might be. So you've got to make sure you look at all those sorts of things. With any premises as well, there might be obligations in relation to maintenance of those premises. You want to consider those. There could be costs for that. Who's responsible for what? Those sorts of things. One of the other things with any lease is that there's always going to be default provisions in there. So if something happens and you don't pay your rent, or you need to leave for whatever reason, there's going to be conditions in there about what's going to happen if you default, what you need to pay, those sorts of things, and you've got obligations there. So you really want to look at those when you're looking at a lease in this context. And you've also got, sort of flowing from that, is there may be security provisions in your lease. So if you're a company and you're entering into a lease expanding your premises, then it's likely that the landlord's going to be asking you as a director for personal guarantees. And you can negotiate that you're not going to give that. You might have to give a larger bond or whatever it might be, but just be aware that there are going to be personal guarantees that you're probably going to have to be asked to sign, and that could be all the directors whatever it might be. So something to think about, that there are going to be security issues with that. But you can always, talk to the landlord, the agent, those sorts of things about, negotiating terms of any lease. They're not all just the same. You can talk about and change things along the way. And the other thing you need to think about is what happens if the property's damaged or destroyed and those sorts of things. So the lease will have provisions in there about that. And you want to make sure, flowing from that you've got insurance and those sorts of things as well, which we've spoken about earlier. So, this is a time again where you're going to be seeking advice from your consultants, and that will be your lawyer about the terms of the lease, whether it's good for you, those sorts of things. When you're expanding as well, obviously the size of the premises, you don't want to, you've got grand plans, you've set all your goals, you want to have 20 employees in the new business, and you've got one office and one desk. Obviously you want larger premises to expand into. You don't want to go and get 1,000 square meters, but if you're going to expand your business and you've got goals, then you want to allow the space to cater for that. So that'd be another thing I'd say as well with new premises and lease. So yeah, I think that's probably it.
I think that covers new premises lease. Lots of information there, but all very important stuff. So the next one are your employees. So unless you're a sole operator, and if you're a sole operator, you probably aren't expanding your business too far. You need to have employees or staff. So employees can be contractors, and when we do phase 4, bringing on employees, that includes contractors. We'll talk a bit more about some of the considerations that you need to have in relation to what you need to do when you actually bring on employees. But in the context of phase 7, here, if you're opening up another business premises, you're going to need more staff. Whether you're a retail shop and you've got 2 business locations, you're going to need new staff. If you're a professional service office and you have multiple business locations, you're going to need additional staff. Who they are and what that looks like is really a discussion that you need to have with your consultants. So you need to talk to your lawyer, your accountant, your business mentors and coaches to work out what actually employees you need to actually operate your business. For instance, do you need a secretary in both offices? Do you need a receptionist? Do you need particular staff in each office to actually provide the different advice in each place? Also, you need to think about what your employment policies are. So in phase 4, we talk a lot about bringing on employees, but also what you do when you've got them and how you actually regulate what they do. So employment policies, if you don't have them before phase 7, are an absolute must. You need to be able to ensure that you have a consistent policy of how your staff act, what they get, what rights they have, what their obligations are to wear uniforms, to leave, to provide, to come to training events. All that kind of information needs to be consistent across all of your business premises. Especially if you're franchising, when you're franchising, and again we'll go into this in a bit more detail, but when you're franchising, your franchisees, the people who take up the franchises, are looking for information from you about how to run their business. They are looking for information about how you bring on employees, but also how they manage their employees. So you need to be able to provide that information. So when you bring in more employees, the other issue is that you get different personalities. We know this, we employ people, and different employees bring in different challenges. There's nothing wrong with that, and there are many ways to be right. But if you've got multiple employees, you're going to have multiple personalities. So you need to be able to manage those personalities to make sure that the business operates successfully. Because at the end of the day, by the time you're at this phase, you should be doing a lot more work on your business than in your business, but you need to make sure that your employees are working well together and that they're also providing a good experience for your customers or clients. At the end of the day, they're the ones who have probably the most client-facing or customer-facing focus in the business. So you need to make sure that you go through and make sure that there's some consistency there. So what we recommend in that space is something that we've always made sure we've done, and that's to have consistent staff training. So consistent, bringing your employees together. So if you've got 2 offices or 2 shops or 10 or 20, bring them together at least once a month, or if that's not practical, bring some senior management together once a month, because they'll be able to talk about different issues they're facing within the business. And it also, what we've found is it stops any animosity. People, and I think it's not 90, 70% of all communication is non-verbal. So, that's your body language, that's the way that the tone of your voice. So if you're not seeing people and not talking to people on a regular basis, then miscommunications happen. So you really need to be careful with making sure that if you do have multiple premises and you've got lots of people, that you're bringing them together so that they know each other and that they talk to each other. And you'll probably find that a lot of the problems that happen in one premises probably happen in the other one as well. So bringing them together actually solves those problems. And the last thing I wanted to say about employees is, and this is kind of a continuing theme through the business legal life cycle, and that's not taking barbecue advice from your friends and family. Now, I say this often, but well-meaning friends and family who give you barbecue advice about what to do, especially when you're expanding the business, don't understand your situation. Every single business is different. Every single business's situation is different and needs particular advice. And especially when you're expanding, and especially when you're bringing on new employees. So make sure that you get advice, whether that's a lawyer, an employment consultant, your business mentor or coach, your accountant, your bookkeeper. Get advice and make sure that you understand what the implications are, because you may not realize that there may be additional tax consequences as well. And your well-meaning friend or family member may not realize that payroll tax might kick in once you employ over a certain level will pay a certain level of wages for your employees. So make sure you get advice and you don't miss anything there. So that's employees. Craig, do you want to talk about mergers and acquisitions?
Yeah, certainly. All right, so mergers and acquisitions. Merger, straightforward, you're merging with another business, and acquisition is you're acquiring a business, so you're buying a business. Both of these are probably a more riskier approach to expanding your business, I would say, but to reduce that risk, and I know we harp on about it, is talk to your consultants and make sure that you've got all the agreements in place. This is not the area where you would be handshake agreement with your neighbour about merging your businesses and not having some form of agreement in place when you're merging. So as it says, you're merging your business with someone else's. So it might be that they've got a product that they sell that isn't necessarily a direct competitor for you, but it's relevant to yours, or it's something that's along the same sort of industry. So you could merge with that business. And when you are thinking about merging, you need to think as well that the person that you're merging with, or the company you're merging with, that they're on the same path as you. So that's when you're going to be talking about your goals and those sorts of things. If you merge with someone and you haven't spoken about that, then you could be in all sorts of trouble down the track. So we've seen it before where two people, friends, businesses are not necessarily competitors, but they're, work well together in terms of what they offer, merged, happy days, going along nicely, and then sort of one partner, I guess you describe them as, wanted one particular thing, and they thought they were on this path. The other one was quite happy with what they were doing and didn't really want to do any more sort of going out there and getting any more work. So you've got to think about who you're merging with to make sure that that person is aligned to your goals. So you'd go out and talk to them about that and the goals and those sorts of things. So pretty important to do in that stage. When you're acquiring a business, obviously you're relying on that person to give you the information that you need to make sure that you're acquiring a business that you actually want. There's no little landmines that are going to be sitting there waiting for you when you acquire that business. So as part of that, you would have spoken to your team, your lawyers, your accountants, and you would have come up with an agreement about how you're going to acquire that. And there's going to be built into that, hopefully, some form of due diligence. So that's where you get to have a look into the business to make sure what you're buying is actually what you think you're buying, that the price that you're paying actually is what you should be paying in terms of what the business is. You're going to be looking at financials, those sorts of things, any agreements they've got, supplier agreements they've got, those sorts of things, so you know that the value is there that you're buying, because the last thing you want to do is spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on acquiring a business, and all the agreements that they've got that they say are what brings in the money actually disappears on the first day that you walk in there. So you want to be able to do all that due diligence. Obviously there's no guarantee that the business is going to be the same level of success when you acquire it, but as I said before, there's ways of reducing your risk as much as possible. So doing these sorts of things will allay that fear. Hopefully you can go into it and merge or acquire a business, and happy days from there.
Yeah, Craig, I think it's really good to just give an example here. And I thought we could talk about a recent client that we've got. Now, I'm not going to give any names away, but this was a client who acquired a business and looking to expand their business. And this was quite a shocking case where someone acquired a business looking to expand and it didn't work out because they didn't get legal, accounting, or any advice. So do you mind if I'll just give that quick example? You know about it, but I've got to prepare a little thing here. So basically, these clients bought a business. They bought the business. It was a cafe. They found it on a website. I won't mention any names, but they found it on a well-known website where you can buy products, and now you can buy businesses from there. They didn't get any advice, and they handed over $50,000 to the seller, and the seller left. Now, I know the sellers. I don't think that they did anything wrong, or I don't think they thought that they did anything wrong. But after the buyers bought the business, they came to see us because they wanted a little bit of advice about just making sure that everything was set up correctly. So we sat down and had a look at the business, and we discovered the following problems. And this is no exaggeration. This is actually what happened. First of all, it was a cafe. It didn't have a food business license. So the previous owner had been operating without the correct authority from the local council. Second, they didn't have a lease. The lease for the previous premises, well, they did have that lease, but it was never assigned to them when they bought the premises. To compound the issue, so number three, is the fact that that lease wasn't for the whole area that they thought it was. So the cafe had an indoor and outdoor area, and the lease was only for the indoor area. The equipment also in the premises, they thought that they were buying the equipment in the premises. Well, the lease makes it clear that the landlord owes the equipment, and that the seller couldn't sell that to them. They also bought the business, just signed a contract in their own names, and hadn't set up any entities. Now, you can ask why they did that. Well, they did that because they just wanted to do the agreement on a handshake. Now, what that's meant is a complete disaster. They've had to come to us to try and help them fix these problems. We've had to set up entities. We're going to be transferring businesses and paying double stamp duty on the transfer. We're negotiating with the landlord to try and resolve that issue about the leased premises, get a lease for the premises, which is pretty important, and get a lease for the outside area. And also, basically the buyer is sitting there going, what did we pay for? We spent all this money, what do we pay for? Now, if they'd gone and got some advice, even from their accountant, they would have found that all these issues, or at least some of the issues, and they would have been warned. By not getting advice can cause huge problems. Now, this may seem like an exaggerated example, but it's a real example, and it's something that we're dealing with, at the time of this recording, because someone didn't get advice. Now, that's not their fault. I don't think the seller, as I said, did anything untoward. I'm not saying that they did. I don't think that they intentionally did this. But by not getting advice, neither party getting advice, and just basically doing it on a handshake, has caused massive problems. We're talking at least $20,000 in extra fit-out costs, in extra legal fees to try and resolve all the issues. So, we might bang on a little bit about getting the right advice, but you need to, otherwise it can become a huge problem. So do you want to add anything on that?
No, I think just wrapping up on that, due diligence, making sure everything's in order before you go and merge or acquire a business. As Jeremy just said, the cost of fixing those things is high. The stress is probably even higher, and that's not what you want in business. You want to merge with someone or acquire a business and continue expanding and building your empire or whatever it might be. So you don't want these sorts of things and keeping up at night. So definitely when you're doing these sorts of things, as I said, there is risk because you're dealing with third parties, where if you're expanding your premises or bringing on employees, obviously you've got a bit more control over who you're doing that with. But when you're merging or acquiring a business, then you're relying on information provided by other people. So you need to look through it and make sure it's all correct. Yep. And there's no little doozies like what Jeremy described. So, due diligence in this is key. So, I think move on to the next one, Jeremy.
Yeah. So the last one that we're going to talk about today is equipment. So many businesses operate using equipment machinery. So anyone listening to the podcast, the image that's on the screen, you can go and look at it on the Facebook Live or the YouTube video, but it's a picture of a piece of machinery for a construction site. Many businesses use that kind of machinery in their business. And that's a way that people can use to expand their business by acquiring new assets to do new work. I was just talking to a client last week who runs a drilling business, contracting out to some big quarry companies, and they have expanded their business sixfold since they first started the business by acquiring new drills and new employees to actually run that business. So here, the things to think about are how are you buying it? Most of us don't have the money to buy a large piece of equipment in cash. If you do, great. If you don't, well, you need to think about your equipment leases or chattel mortgage taken over by that security. Make sure that what an asset, you want to make sure that you do the searches to make sure that what you're buying is unencumbered, because